but for everything that cheap oil and cheap energy in general brought to the U.S. economy. There's no way of talking about this without acknowledging that cheap oil and cheap energy could not last forever. They seem to be finite resources, at least cheap oil historically turned out to be a finite resource. After 1970, energy costs began to rise, in particular as oil-producing nations like Saudi Arabia and others which had banded together into the international organization known as OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, start to assert their authority, start to assert their power, their economic power, as the countries controlling this massively important international resource. They start to assert it in matters of foreign policy, especially after the Yom Kippur War of 1973, when they embargo oil exports to the United States, which has come to the aid of Israel. Beginning in 1973, then, we start to see a series of energy crises in the U.S. economy, a series of times when oil prices rise dramatically. Those rises in oil price wouldn't always cause noticeable bursts of inflation, notable times when prices rise, not just in energy, but across the board. But at several points they would do so. And more than that, the ways in which the end of cheap energy brought to Americans a sense that they were no longer fully in control of their economic fate would cause other problems and other reassessments as well. Some would argue for more cautious use of energy, for a shift to greater energy efficiency, a shift away from inefficiency. Others would argue for a more expansive foreign policy to assert greater control over those kinds of resources. And others would argue that the answer actually lay in long-term technological transformation that would move Americans away from dependence on oil onto other sorts of energy sources. The ultimate outcome of that, of course, remains to be seen. But after 1973 in particular, energy and the end of cheap energy would never be fully absent from American discussions of the future of American capitalism.